Genesis 11, verse 3. And so, this is a really interesting text because you've got these people, or, this group, coming to say, come let us. And so, here it says, and they said to one another, come let us make bricks, and burned them thoroughly, and they had brick for stone, and bitumen for mortar. Then they said, come let us build ourselves a city and tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the earth. Now, I got to thinking, I'm thinking about this a little bit here, and it says, I wonder where the concept or the fear of them being dispersed over the face of the earth came from. There's this whole idea that the Lord told Moses and his kids to multiply on the face of the earth. And so they are going directly against the word of God here. They're going directly against the word of the Lord and his command. This was actually the first one also in Genesis chapter 2, that they were supposed to multiply and fill the earth. And now they're directly going against the word of God. They are saying, come let us. This is that idea of a conspiracy. And it's another theme that kind of takes off here. We'll see it in Psalm, Psalm 83 and others, where these conspiracies start creeping up. And you're going to see that division. We talk about that this morning again, the separation that God does. He separates the light and the dark. There's these groups that are conspiring against God, and we're going to see some examples of that. So in Genesis 8, go back there for a second. Genesis 10:8, Cush fathered Nimrod. He was the first on earth to be a mighty man. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Therefore it is said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. The beginning of his kingdom was Babel, Erech, Akkad, and you can see the point there is it's the beginning of his kingdom. His kingdom. Now, I heard a very good teacher this last week, I should say, talk about there's three significant rebellions that the Jews would understand and that the church in particular does not understand. He talks about the rebellion in Genesis 4. He talks about the rebellion in Genesis 6. And he talks about the rebellion here. And what I'm going to suggest is that yes, that's true, but there's a progression of rebellion. That's the way I would actually like to look at it. Because I want to go back and just remind you of what happens here. That in Genesis 3, Adam rebels. In Genesis 4, we know that Cain rebels. Then Lamech rebels. What is wrong with my tongue today? It's weird.
Your brain works fast.
Yeah, I need to slow down here or something. My tongue is rebelling. So there's this progression of rebellion. And I want to remind you that Lamech, he rebels in his government against God. Cain is going to build a city and name it. So this is rebellion upon rebellion is what Nimrod is doing. And remember what his name means. It means rebel. The beginning of his kingdom. Now, I want to also suggest that this idea of the beginning of his kingdom, I wonder if that is meant to be, you can't say eternally. You can't say forever for sure. But how about as long as the earth stands? Is that the beginning of this man's kingdom? And by the way, the spirit behind what's going on? It's an interesting concept. The beginning of his kingdom. Where does it end? Because we know that this is Babylon, Shinar, And again, we contemplate those things when we get into Zechariah and other places, okay? So that's an interesting concept, the beginning of his kingdom. Cain was the first to build a city, Genesis 4:10. Lamech was the first anti-God government, a local government, if he was like mayor, you know. And Nimrod does this in spades. He builds a kingdom. So again, I want to compare what was happening here. And I think this is really crucial, because we're going to follow this. This is really an interesting thought. They said, come let us make bricks, come let us build cities, come let us make a name for ourselves. Those are really all anti-God. In Genesis 19:32, come let us make our father drink wine. Remember who that is? That's Lot's kids there. And then in Genesis 37, come let us sell him to the Ishmaelites. Those are the brothers of Joseph. So there's a rebellion going on there. Exodus 1:10, come let us deal shrewdly with them. That's the concept of remember when the Pharaoh that didn't know Joseph, he came, and then they said as a group, come let us deal shrewdly with the Israelites. 1 Samuel, come now. Here, 1 Samuel 9:9, come let us go up and see the seer. Psalm 83:4, that was Saul, by the way, go up and see the seer. 1 Samuel 83:4, come let us wipe them out as a nation. That's this conspiracy I mentioned in Psalm 83. Jeremiah 48, come let us cut her off from being a nation. And then Matthew 21, they said ultimately about Jesus, come let us kill him and let us kill him and have his inheritance. And so it's a really interesting concept of the conspiracy of people against God and his government as they conspire with one another. Now, I want to remind you of some times in the word where it's actually on the other side. That's why I colored these red and blue. Austin, come here, please. That's why I colored these red and blue as kind of as an opposite, not so much the USA and Russia there, but it's kind of the idea that there's an interesting comparison going on here. In Genesis 1:26, Elohim said, let us make man. In 11:7, Yahweh said, now isn't that interesting? Yahweh said, come let us go down and confuse their language. Right? See what's happened there? There's a change of terms. Now, I'm not sure I really want to get into this right now, but I think it's very, very important. And I want to say something here. There's a significant study, if people want to go back and look at Genesis 1 and 2, there's a significant study to be had why God, Elohim, is used in Genesis 1 and Yahweh, Elohim, is used in Genesis 2. Yahweh is the personal God. God, Elohim, is the creator God, and we all understand that. But something else, something more significant is happening there, and I just don't want to get into that right now, but we will as we go along. 1 Samuel 11, come let us go to Gilgal and there renew the kingdom. Who said that? Samuel. Now, what am I suggesting here? Well, first of all, let's be careful. I'm using biblical terms and the biblical concept and the biblical terminology of let us. This is, I think, really helpful for the church. You have the enemy, a conspiring enemy against God, saying, let us go do these things. And when we join God, we are on the other side. And we use terms like, well, let us, as a group, as a church, on God's behalf. Watch how this plays out. That was Samuel said to Israel, come let us go up to Gilgal, renew the kingdom. 1 Samuel 14:1. Come, let us go over to the Philistines' garrison. Who said that? That was Jonathan with his servant. Let's go over. And he's doing it in faith on behalf of God. Nehemiah 2:7. Come, let us build the wall of Jerusalem. Isn't this interesting? I mean, I find this so helpful and so interesting that on God's behalf, we are as a group saying, come, let us go do this. Let us do the right things. Psalm 95. Oh, come, let us sing to the Lord. Psalm 95:6. Come, let us worship and bow down. That's a wonderful song, isn't it? Let us kneel before the Lord our Maker. Isaiah 2:3. Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord. Hosea 6:1. Come, let us return to the Lord. See, we're doing these things on behalf of the Lord and on behalf of his people. A reminder of the divine counsel. Psalm 82, God has taken his place in the divine counsel in the midst of the gods. He holds judgment. So he is calling people to his group, his side, into the light. And there's the red and the blue, if you will. There's the comparison, the separation. Psalm 89:5. Let the heavens praise your name, O wonders, your wonders. O Lord, your faithfulness in the assembly of the holy ones. For who in the skies can be compared to the Lord? Who among the heavenly beings is like the Lord? A God greatly to be feared in the council of the holy ones, and awesome above all who work or who are around. Now, watch this. We have the Bible. We have the scriptures here. All right? And everything that the Lord has decreed that he wants known to us is written down here. All right? So you and I, we agree on this, and we have a meeting, or we have, a come to mind, a meeting on the minds of some kind of instruction or whatever. And when we agree on this, we say together, come, let us go do this together. And that's the whole come, let us worship, bow down, and all those kinds of things, okay? Satan has strived to set up his own counsel and conspiracy. And I think this happened right off the bat. He wanted to take Adam and Eve down the road with him. He tried to talk to Eve at first and saying, hey, did God really say, let's put our minds together. Let us agree on something. And obviously Eve agreed, and then Adam rebelled, okay? Isaiah 14:12-14. How art thou fallen from heaven, O day star, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, and that didst lay low the nations? And thou sayest in thy heart, I will. I will. I will ascend to the heavens. I will exalt my throne above the stars. I will sit upon the mount of the congregation. See that one? I will sit upon the mount of the congregation. Which congregation? God's people? Take over God's counsel? I think there's a huge conspiracy here. He wanted everything that God had. In the uttermost parts of the north, I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. When I read this from now on, this kind of thing, I think about this idea. So let's just say, and we can't really fathom this, but let's just say that you could see the counsel of God, and God is in the judge's chair, all right? He's got the judge's chair. But he's got other principalities and powers in different places, separate places, and he's got personalities doing certain things, okay? And so they're coming together, and they're bringing these ideas, remember, I think even Zechariah, where he calls the horsemen that went out to the four corners of the earth to come in, and he tells them to report, and they report. So he's lining them up this one day, and people are making reports, and God is making judgments on those reports. And can you imagine Satan before he fell, Lucifer, whatever his name was before he fell, in that council and looking at God and being prejudiced being jealous of that counsel, being jealous of God's seat. Satan is jealous of God's counsel and his seat. And he's calling the shots. He's got the final say. And he's directing everything and everybody. And Satan said, well, I can do that. I will do that. Now, I think I pointed this out last week. Yahweh responds. And I've heard the 5 wills of Satan a lot. A lot. I've never heard anybody talk about the 5 I wills of God right afterwards. It's in the same chapter. I will rise up against them. Let's think about that. Wait a minute. I thought it was just I will. I thought it was just Satan. I just thought it was that one person. No, he says, I will rise up against them. I will cut off from Babylon name and remnant. Now, why am I suggesting that Babylon has anything to do with this evil counsel? Because, first of all, I think it does. And Babylon is the picture of the spiritual principalities, the whoring religion, if you will. Babylon, Shinar, we've already said, is the birthplace of the occult. And it will continue to be. I think it will be the last place of the occult. Zechariah 5. So he says, I will cut off Babylon. He is cutting off that religion. And we're going to see that in Revelation. Fallen is Babylon. He says, I will make it a position of the hedgehogs. I will sweep it with the broom of the destruction. I will break the Assyrian in my land. Remember, the Assyrian comes out of the first part of Isaiah as the Antichrist, and I believe the second portion, there's probably several portions of Isaiah, but the second portion, if you will, is a picture of Babylon as the principalities and the powers. The Assyrian is a picture of the man, the Antichrist. Now, I looked through these verses 22 through 25, and I found these 3. And you can look through there and hammer this out. I couldn't find, I'm sorry, 5. I found these 5. I couldn't find 4, and I couldn't find 6. I saw these 5. And so, Bob?
Are we getting here into free will versus God's sovereignty?
I'm talking about this conspiracy. Look prior here. In Isaiah 14, 12 through 14, Satan said, I will 5 times. So he's setting himself up. He wants to set himself up as God. And in verse 22 through 25, God says, well, you think you will, but I will. God is opposing Satan's I will.
Okay.
God is opposing Satan here. He's saying to them, actually them, but him, you think that you will set yourself up to be judge and counsel, but this is what I'm going to do.
Okay, so we're looking at Satan's rebellion in the context of I will.
Yes.
And we're looking at the response of Yahweh.
Correct.
Use of I will.
That's correct. Yes. So they make these boasts, and God said, well, that's not going to work because I will do these things. And the first thing he says, I will rise up against them. And that's all he has to say. It's over from that point on. Then, in that same chapter, God mocks those. He mocks those whosoever will. God will mock Satan and everybody else who says, and he says this, for the Lord of hosts has purposed, and who will annul it? See, he uses that, who will. He uses, nobody will. Nobody can will anything. Because the Lord has purposed, the Lord of hosts has purposed it. Who will annul it? His hand is stretched out, and who will turn it back? He's shoving it right back in the devil's face, in Satan's face. And I think every conspirator, every wish to be, will be, antichrist, every person against God, the whole planet, there's nobody that will come up against him And he's suggesting this. Now, again, I want to say this. These words are echoed in heaven. I heard somebody else the other day talking about the things that are written in heaven, the Lamb's Book of Life and the Book of Remembrance, and I think the eternal word is written in heaven. Okay, there's so many books mentioned. Now, these words are echoed in heaven. Everybody knows this. Satan knows this, but he still tries. And the world even knows this in their heart. They still try. But we're going to watch this play out. That God will save the remnant of the people. He will save a remnant of Israel. He will save a remnant, a very small remnant, of the Old Testament Gentiles as they come through Israel and others. But also, he's going to save the church, of course. And so we're going to see this play out. No one will. No one will. Only God will. Now, concerning the one who willed, this is Nimrod. This is back to Nimrod. Concerning the one who willed to annul God's government and plans, Genesis 10, 9a, Cush fathered the rebel, Nimrod. Cush fathered Nimrod. His name literally means he turned himself against, or the resultant name would be to be rebellious or a rebel. That's what his name means. All right? Genesis 10:9b. He was the first on the earth to be a mighty man. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Therefore it is said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. So let's understand first the idea of mighty man. Is that a good thing? We'll go through this. It's used regarding a warrior, usually a warrior, all right? 2 Samuel 23:16. A mighty men broke through the camp of the Philistines. You remember, that's when David was thirsty and he asked for a cup. And they broke through the camp and brought back the water, you know. And so his mighty men, David had mighty men. But more is involved with this mighty man, Nimrod. Nimrod's warrior infamy resounded on the earth. He's the first on the earth to be a mighty man. The question that you would have when you first read this is this a good term? When it says before the Lord or in the presence of the Lord, is that a good term? The term mighty hunter oftentimes corresponds to hunting men. Genesis 10:9. The Hebrew word for hunt is tayyid or tazid. I'm sorry, tayyid, sa'id, which is used on the occasion for hunting men. 1 Samuel 24:12. Saul hunted David's life. The word there is used the same. It's the same word. Sayyid. Jeremiah 16:16. Behold, I am sending for many fishers beyond the Lord, declares the Lord, and they shall catch them. And afterward I will send for many hunters. That's the word. And they shall hunt them from every mountain and every hill and out of the clefts of the rock. Okay? And so the Lord is hunting his people down, and he's sending hunters to do it. He's sending hunters to do it. Lamentations 3:52. I have been hunted like a bird. This is basically Israel speaking. I have been hunted like a bird by those who were my enemies without a cause. And you could even suggest that that's Christ speaking. But that in particular is Israel right there. This is the book of Lamentations. So the word is hunted, and basically by a warrior or somebody used by God or a bad person. And by the way, even bad people are used by God. So the term before the Lord is literally translated before the face of the Lord. It is used both positively and negatively, and the context determines its use. The context of before the presence of the Lord or the face of the Lord determines its use. It's fairly simple. Watch. Leviticus 23:20. The priest shall wave them with the bread of the first fruits as a wave offering before the Lord. That's a good thing. All right? In Numbers 3:4, Nahab and Abihu died before the Lord when they offered unauthorized fire before the Lord. Okay? Part B is bad. They offered unauthorized fire before the Lord, so they died before the Lord. I'll let you judge whether that was good or bad. In the presence of the Lord, that was a good thing. He wanted them to die. So, therefore, the context of Nimrod's actions stipulate whether he was for good or for God or in the face of God. All right? And when you first come through that and you say he was a mighty hunter before the Lord, well, that's kind of hard to understand. But then when you read about his kingdoms and all that stuff, now we have a context that is bad. There's nothing good about Nimrod. Everything is bad. He built city after city. He built 8 of them. In doing so, building the cities, he established the first kingdom on earth, worldly kingdom. He raised two areas historically renowned for their animosity and hatred for both God and Israel. What are those areas? Assyria and Babylon. Okay? Shinar, the area of Ur, all of those places. So, but you can basically say Assyria and Babylon, okay? And we'll see some maps on those, and I think we already have, but we'll see some more. From these areas came both cult religions and anti-God governments, Shinar, Babylon, and Assyria. Therefore, in using terms such as he began to be a mighty man and the beginning of his kingdoms, God is explaining that he was the first dictator. Nimrod is the first rebel. Worldwide, I guess, rebel or worldwide dictator, if you will. He was the first dictator. He was the first slave owner, I believe. He was a hunter. So I think he was a slave owner. He was a tyrant, and he was an autocrat. He was just overpowering with might and money and everything. He had all the power. He is the preeminent anti-God and forerunner. I should spell that right. I think that's supposed to be an E there. Right? Forerunner of the antichrist who is ultimately to come. I want to mention something about antichrist here real quick. The church uses the term antichrist. It's a valid term. It's not a strictly biblical term of a man. There's no title for that man there. Okay? But we're going to use antichrist as a title because it's helpful, right? Just as we use rapture and those kinds of words, that Trinity, those kinds of things. Following is a clear and profound case in 2 parts that provide a clear thread that both Assyria and Babylon play out to the end of time. And that the Assyrian is the man of sin. So isn't it interesting that this man, Nimrod, built these 8 cities, and he built them in Babylon and Assyria. It's astonishing. I don't think that we take these parentheses, even if they're short, we don't study them enough. The one about Canaan, Ham, and remember Ham and Canaan. The one about Peleg, the earth is divided in his time. We don't take those parentheses or a sentence or two. We kind of bypass them. Yeah, I know about that. But if we stop and study them, we really come out with some very, very interesting stuff. So when you ponder that idea that he built those 8 cities, then you put them on a map where they were, and you start tracking these through the Bible, and like Gary's doing on Sunday morning, when you go through Isaiah, you run into Assyria and you run into Babylon. And when you go to Jeremiah, it's the same thing basically. When you go through all the prophets, it's the same exact thing. That you run into Assyria and Babylon over and over and over. So I'm just going to establish this for you. this is the way I view it. The Assyrian is the man, the Antichrist. Assyria is the world's kingdoms. And Babylon is the heavenly, not heavenly, but the principalities and powers, if you will, the spiritual kingdom, the religious kingdom. It is going to be the power behind the world's kingdom. You should realize that and remember that as we get into Abraham and others. It's going to be very helpful, even through the rest of the Bible. I think it's very helpful. I think that once you start understanding this and you go back and read Isaiah, if you were to try to read Isaiah in one or two settings, you would get a real clear picture of this whole concept of Assyria and Babylon and how they play out through history. After, by the way, if you could get through Jeremiah, but go read Revelation, because you're going to see Babylon in a big way there as well, of course. So case number one, let's make this case. The book of Isaiah and Micah establishes the case for the Antichrist to come, the man. Now others do as well, but I just wanted to use these two for now. He either comes from Assyria or at least will rule from there. Assyria is a picture of world dominion or domination through harsh dictatorship and war. Assyria was the harshest master of all world powers. His cruelty is unmatched. The Assyrians' cruelty will rise again. There are actually some who say that Nebuchadnezzar's cruelty was unmatched. And you could probably make a case for that. But Assyria, especially with Israel, their harshness with Israel is unmatched in particular. And so I'm just going to stick with that for now. And by the way, watch what Babylon does here in a little bit. So Isaiah 11:5. Woe to Assyria, the rod of my anger, the staff in their hands is my fury. Against a godless nation I send him. So God is sending. Now, preach this in the pulpit on Sunday morning and find out what happens. Preach this in most of the denominations today and find out what happens. Against a godless nation I send him. Who is sending Assyria? God. And when we go and preach this and teach this to a church that has not been taught this in Sunday school as a child, this is easily rejected by people because we don't understand it. It doesn't sound like the God that I met or knew or somebody taught me or preached to me. He's the God of love. He doesn't do this. He doesn't spank his kids. We stop spanking our kids. He doesn't discipline us harshly. And then you got to go read Hebrews chapter 12. Because yes, he does. He's sending a godless nation against the people, his own people. Read Habakkuk, again, back to Habakkuk, and that has to come up every once in a while, I think. I commanded him to take spoil and seize plunder. Now, I have to caveat here. I mean, not caveat, but I have to stop here for a second. This taking spoil and seizing plunder comes up over and over and over and over. And it is in Isaiah chapter 17, the fall of Damascus. It is in chapter 38 and 39 of Ezekiel. This idea of taking plunder, by the way, Obadiah, Edom is punished for taking plunder and taking part of Babylon's sins there and taking their people captive. And so God's going to turn this around. He's going to say, I'm going to send my people to take plunder. And so watch how that plays out in the Old Testament. That's another theme that people should write down and just kind of follow as well. Another thread, if you will. So God's going to command him to take plunder and spoil and to tread them down like the mire of the streets. When the Lord has finished all his work on Mount Zion and on Jerusalem, he will punish the speech of the arrogant heart of the king of Assyria and the boastful look in his eyes. In that day, okay, here we go. So did Assyria come against Israel? Yes. Did he conquer Israel? Yes. He destroyed the northern kingdoms. And then he besieged the southern kingdoms. Okay? We know he did that. But in the same chapter, and again, as Gary likes to talk up here in front, that there's near prophecies happening here, and then there's far prophecies as well. In that day, what day is that? The Lord jumps forward, and I believe he already has jumped forward, but he's using a near and far prophecy, because in that day is the day of the Lord. In that day, the remnant of Israel and the survivors of the house of Jacob will no more lean on him who struck them, but will lean on the Lord, the Holy One of Israel, in truth. A remnant will return, the remnant of Jacob, to the mighty God. Who's going to return? The lost 10 tribes? No. Not the lost 10 tribes. The remnant of the 12 tribes, including Israel, who's Jacob's, he's the namesake there. So, that is going to happen in the day of the Lord. Isaiah 14, go back there. The Lord of hosts has sworn, as I have planned, so shall it be, and as I have purposed, so shall it be. So I will break the Assyrian in my land, and on my mountains trample him underfoot. And his yoke shall depart from them, and his burden from their shoulder. This is the purpose that is purposed concerning the whole earth. And this is the hand that is stretched out over all the nations. Now, there's so many good teachers right now. They teach Isaiah, they teach prophecy, they teach some of these things. But when they come up to certain things like right here, they want to kind of stop and be careful. Now, we do want to be careful. I'm not saying go crazy here. But we just have to read the text. And we have to be true to the text, okay? The Assyrian, I will break the Assyrian in the land. Here's a little history. When the Assyrians came down, they conquered many of the towns of Israel. And the last town that they conquered was Lachish. It was down more toward the coast. It was southwest of Jerusalem. It was down on the coast. And there's a huge ramp, siege ramp up to there. And when they were about to be conquer this, when that siege ramp was just about finished, Sennacherib, who in this case would be the Assyrian at the time, he would be the Assyrian king, he sent word to Hezekiah that I'm going to come and conquer you after Lachish. And so when Lachish was conquered, the Assyrians moved toward Jerusalem, and we all remember what happened. That the night before they were going to invade Jerusalem, the Lord sent an angel and killed 185,000. He killed 185,000 Assyrians. Now, the king didn't die there. So, if you want to make a literal case here that this was during that time, you could say he was conquered there and he was sent home. But the Assyrian, the king, was not conquered there, or himself individually. He went home, and he actually got killed by his son up there in his hometown, in his home, on his own throne. So the Assyrian, while the troops were broken in the land, you can make a case that was a near prophecy there. But look at verse 26. This is the purpose that is purpose concerning what? Jerusalem? Or Israel? No, it concerns the whole earth. The whole earth. This is a distant prophecy. So the Assyrian is going to be broken in the land before the whole earth. Now, you never really want to make a case that there's one book in the Bible that is more important than the others. But it is interesting to me that the whole entire book of Isaiah is found in the Qumran scrolls. And it is also interesting to me that it covers the Assyrian, it covers Babylon, it covers Christ coming back, it covers Israel coming back to the land, it covers all of this stuff, and in detail, the destruction of the earth. So you read Isaiah before you read Micah chapter 5, and you come to Micah 5:2, and we read basically the same thing. But you, O Bethlehem Ephrathah, who are too little to be among the clans of Judah, from you shall come forth from me one who is ruler in Israel, whose coming forth is from old and from ancient of days. Now I'd like to stop there, and I'd like to remind our church and our people here that that's always a little Bethlehem story. We get a bunch of our songs from there, old little town of Bethlehem and all those things. And they're wonderful songs, and we need to keep those songs and keep singing those songs. We need to talk about the baby in the manger and all of that stuff. But we can't stop with verse 2. We got to read all of it. And all of Micah. Micah 4 is very important. Micah 5:2, and then 5:5. And so this little king, this little baby, he shall be the peace when what? When the Assyrian comes into the land. I have talked to people, I've tried to talk to people about Jesus when he comes back, that he's coming back with a sword, with an iron scepter right off the bat. And some people, they don't want to hear it. They just don't want to hear that. They just want to hear of peace on earth, goodwill to man. And that is not going to be the case in tribulation, and even at the end of the tribulation. This is so important that, and we're going to see this actually in the Bible News Update today. I'm going to cover some of this, that he is going to literally come and he's going to take charge of troops, and he's going to destroy the Assyrian and others as well. And we'll look at that later on. But for right now, let's talk about the Assyrian. He shall be our peace when the Assyrian is in the land and treads in our palaces. Go back to Daniel chapter 8, Antichrist, Daniel chapter 11, others, Daniel chapter 9. When this Antichrist comes into Israel and conquers the land and treads in the palaces, that's when Jesus comes back. And this is, I guess we may as well just take a little shortcut here, or a little sideshow here. Sidebar is a better. That's why when the covenant of many is made, you can start counting the days. I believe that when they start making sacrifices in the third temple, you can start counting the days. 2300, Daniel chapter 8. You can count, let's say we didn't stop counting, we started counting, maybe we came to God at the 3.5 year point, when we saw the abomination of desolation. What can you do? Count the days. Start counting the days. 42 months, 1260 days. Okay? So when he makes a treaty or a covenant with many, and it's not makes, he's strengthening. When he strengthens, and I believe it's the Abraham Accords in particular, when he strengthens the Abraham Accords, you can start counting 1260 days when he steps into the temple of God and breaks his covenant. And so so when the Assyrian comes into our land and treads in our palaces, then we will raise against him 7 shepherds and 8 princes of men. This is that let us go, right? Watch this. We will raise up. Who's talking here? At the beginning of Micah chapter 5, it says, and I should read it. Jerusalem, daughter, right? The daughter of Jerusalem, muster your troops, right? That's what it says. Micah 5. Now muster your troops, O daughter of troops. Siege is laid against us with a rod that strikes the judge of Israel on the cheek. So somebody's come up against the Prince of Jesus Christ, and they've laid siege to Jerusalem, and at some point, God says, muster your troops. Now, I've never heard anybody preach on this. What does it mean for the daughters of Jerusalem to muster your troops? Somebody's going to use some kind of spiritual, mythological kind of an idea. Who are the daughters of Jerusalem? Because that's where the problem is. Who are the daughters of Israel? That's Jerusalem. And so again, at the Bible News Update tonight, we're going to talk a little bit more about that, what it's going to look like. This is what I believe. I'll just put it in a nutshell. Using Scripture. Jesus touches down either on the Mount of Olives or Mount Sinai. He musters troops from heaven, and he goes and gets Israel. And they become strong. He empowers them. The Spirit of the Lord comes on them. This is going to be like the Old Testament. This is going to be a whole bunch of David's mighty men. That's what I believe. They're going to be the Samsons, if you will, except without the sin. And they're going to become like a threshing sledge, like Isaiah says. And so, so it says in here, we will raise against him 7 shepherds and 8 princes of men. And there may very well be 7 shepherds and 8 princes lined out. Pick some. David will be there. Maybe Nehemiah will be there. Whoever. Abraham, whoever. We're not sure. Maybe there's people be alive. Maybe solid people who are alive at that time. But we will raise up. It's kind of like, come let us go fight for the Lord. They shall shepherd. Now these who will raise up, they shall shepherd the land of Assyria. They're going to rule over that land. They won't live there. Watch what it says. They shall shepherd the land of Assyria with the sword, and the land of, there we go, Nimrod at its entrances. He shall deliver us from the Assyrian when he comes into our border and treads within our border. Now, I'm going to say this again, and I heard Chuck Missler say this the other day, and I love that guy. He's passed away, but I still love him. He's in heaven waiting for us. And Chuck, if you're listening, no issues here except this. I've heard him say, and I've heard other people say, that Jesus doesn't need anybody to do this kind of war, and he doesn't. He absolutely does not. And I believe that he kills the Assyrian, the Antichrist or the Assyrian. I believe he kills the Antichrist with the breath of his mouth. I believe that happens. I believe it happens like Herod. He just falls over. But with shepherding the land of Assyria with the sword and the land of Nimrod at its entrances, Jesus shall deliver us like David did. Read 1 Chronicles 22 through 24. Before that. It'd be like 15 through 18, 19, 20. Read that portion of Chronicles, 1 Chronicles, where David is the king there, and his armies are desolating the enemies. And where do they do it? Right here, at the entrances of Babylon and Assyria, at the same spot, along the Euphrates and the Tigris River. Just read it in Chronicles, it specifically says that. So the Lord will deliver us from the Assyrian, but he's not going to do it. He chooses not to do it without his armies, the armies of heaven, the armies of Israel. Because that's what it says. We will raise up 7 shepherds and 8 princesses. And you can't make that Jesus. He's going to lead them. And by the way, chapter 5, verse 1, muster your troops. So in the context There's a whole war going on there. Isaiah 30:27. Behold, the name of the Lord comes from afar, burning with his anger and in thick rising smoke. His lips are full of fury, and his tongue is like a devouring fire. So the Lord is mad, and he's coming, and he's angry. Now watch what happens here. His breath is like an overflowing stream that reaches up to the neck, to sift the nations with the sieve of destruction, and to place on the jaws of the peoples a bridle that leads astray. You shall have a song as in the night when a holy feast is kept, and gladness of heart as when one sets out to the sound of the flute, to go to the mountain of the Lord, to the rock of Israel. And the Lord will cause his majestic voice to be heard, and the descending blow of his arm to be seen in furious anger and flame of devouring fire, with a cloudburst and storm and hailstorms. The Assyrian will be terror-stricken at the voice of the Lord when he strikes with his rod. And every stroke of the appointed staff that the Lord lays on them, watch, the word is them, will be to the sound of tamarines and lyres. Where does that take you? That takes me back to Joshua at the fall of Jericho. They're rejoicing at the conquering of the enemies. Battling with brandished arm, he will fight them. For a burning place has long been prepared. Indeed, for the king is made ready. Its pyre, that's a fire for the burial grounds. Its pyre made deep and wide with fire and wood in abundance. The breath of the Lord like a stream of sulfur kindles it. And so he will come with the word of his mouth and do this, but he will do it with his troops. All right? Now the case number 2, that's the Assyrian. That's the Assyrian. We'll spend a couple minutes, we have a few minutes we'll spend on Babylon, all right? The case number 2, the book of Isaiah prophesies the rise of Babylon and its cultic dominion, and Jeremiah establishes the case that Babylon is the seed of Satan, the dragon. All cultic religions hail from Babylon and will end there. And Babylon, along with its religion, will rise again in culmination with the Assyrian, the antichrist. They have both fallen, and they will both rise again. One, I believe, is spiritual, and one, I believe, is physical. Now think about this. Think about this. When Revelation, I'm trying to remember now exactly where it's at. It says, when it starts talking about 7 were and 1 will be, the 8th is of the 7. The 8th is of the 7. Some people want to say the 8th is Rome. Some people want to say the 8th is, this or that. I believe the 8th kingdom is Assyria. I believe the 8th kingdom is Assyria. I want to just real briefly, if I can, look at that text. Okay, is it Revelation 17? Now, is it of 17? Let's see. Yeah. Okay, right here. Look at verse 5. And on her forehead was written a name of mystery, Babylon the Great, mother of the prostitutes and earth's abominations. And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints, the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. I believe that that is the spiritual Babylon. That's the cultic Babylon. Look at Zechariah chapter 5 again. When I saw her, I marveled greatly, but the angel said to me, why do you marvel? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast with the 7 heads and the 10 horns that carries her. The beast that you saw was and is not, and is about to rise from the bottomless pit and go to destruction. The dwellers on the earth whose names have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world will marvel to see the beast, because it was and is not and is to come. And like we've been saying on Wednesday night in Revelation, that Joe and I believe, and I think Gary carries this as well, that the beast that was and is not can be also both the man and the kingdom. Okay? I think it's pointing to both a man who has fallen and a kingdom who has fallen. All right? And they're both resurrected. They seem to be resurrected. All right? I'm not saying that he's resurrected. I'm saying that it seems to be, but something very strange is happening there. That's for Wednesday nights. Tune in for that. But anyway, this calls for a mind with the wisdom of... The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman is seated. So, there's 7 mountains. They are also 7 kings. By the way, while this can be Rome, this can be the Catholic Church, right here and specifically, it is talking about a culmination of these 7 kings. This beast has 7 heads and 7 kings, 5 of whom have fallen. So who is that? Egypt, Assyria. Go ahead, Gary.
Babylon.
Yep.
Medo-Persia.
Medo-Persia.
Greece.
And Greece. Those are 5 have fallen. All right. Now watch. They are also 7 kings, 5 of whom have fallen. One is, who's that? Rome. So that's the 6th. The other has not yet come. All right? I believe that's the 7th one, right? Now that some say that may be Islam. All right? You can make a case for that. But some say that's Rome again, and that's what I would suggest. Rome, the Antichrist comes out of Rome, but look, this is a very hard and difficult matter here to understand, but it's kind of fun when you look into it. As for the beast that was and is not, it is in what? An 8th. So I heard a very good preacher last week say the 8th is Rome. So now you got 3 Romes? One is, that's Rome. One is to come. We think that's Rome again, Rome part 2. But who's the 8th? I think that's Assyria. I think it's Assyria. Now, you could make a case that that's Babylon again too. And it may be a culmination. By the way, in reality, the 8th one is actually all of these put together. When you go back and read what we did with Revelation chapters 7 and 8, and what Daniel did, and all those, that final beast kingdom is actually a culmination of all of them. But what I'm suggesting is that the Assyrian rises. And when you talk about a king, he has a kingdom. And Micah and Isaiah are very clear that that is the Assyrian. And so I believe that this 8th kingdom is specifically Assyria, and that's how I think that plays out. Is that helpful? A little bit? I know it's confusing because there's, we have to step back into Daniel. 5 have gone. 1 is, which one is that? That's Rome. Which one is coming? That's Rome again, I think. And then the 8th kingdom, I believe, is Assyria. That's the way I suggest that plays out. Okay? I think we want to stop here, and we'll get to this second one, case number 2, again, beginning next week. I really appreciate Austin. I want to just say it publicly that he was able to get the live stream working again this morning, and it's going again, and on all the work that he's putting in. So I appreciate it, Austin. Thank you. And then of course the church and all this. We've got a new system coming up. Hopefully it'll be up next week. So we'll talk about that when it comes. So we'll pray for that. Let's just close in prayer before we do a Bible news update. Lord, thank you for your grace and your mercy, your love. We're so grateful. Help us to understand your way and your will and these things. They're just so fun and magnificent. Scary. Lots of people will be lost, but we pray for so many to be saved as well, and we pray for your redemption and your redemptive power. We worship you and praise you in Jesus' name. Amen.